The last thing I did before locking up my flower shop forever was water the window boxes. I don't know why. The flowers weren't going anywhere with me. Neither was the shop, but I filled that old green watering can, the one with the dent near the spout from when I dropped it back in 2003, and I went along each window, tipping it slow, letting the water run dark into the soil. Petunias, snapdragons, a little trailing ivy that had gotten completely out of control since August. I'd planted them myself in April, not knowing that by December I wouldn't be the one to see them through the frost. My aunt found me like that, standing at the window with an empty watering can, not crying. Just sort of done. The lawyer called, she said from the doorway. They need the keys by 5. I set the can down on the counter. I looked around at the coolers I'd saved up 18 months to buy, the hand-painted sign above the register that my college roommate had made me as a grand opening gift, the little chalkboard by the door where I always wrote the week's seasonal arrangement. Someone had erased it. I don't know when. It just said nothing now, this blank gray square where I used to write things like November, copodalias, smoke bush, and the last of the garden roses. I put the keys on the counter. I walked out. I didn't look back because I knew if I did, I would sit down on the sidewalk and not get out for a very long time. That was the 22nd of December. I had opened Wren Root Floral 11 years earlier, when I was 24 years old and had no business opening anything. And for 11 years, it had been the one thing in my life I was completely sure of. And then it wasn't mine anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because the story doesn't start on that December afternoon. It starts 17 years before it, on a Tuesday in early March, when 2 kids showed up at my back door in the rain. I was 20 years old. I'd been working at my uncle's flower wholesale operation in South Portland since I was 16, after school, weekends, all summer. And when I graduated high school, I just kept going. It wasn't glamorous. It was cold storage and inventory and driving the van to the farmer's market at 5 in the morning. But I loved it. I loved the smell of the cold rooms, that green, sharp smell, and I loved knowing the names of things. Hellebores, Lysianthus, dried lunaria with the papery silver pods. My uncle let me use the back room of the warehouse on Tuesday afternoons, when it was quiet, to make up arrangements and sell them out of a cooler by the loading dock. Mostly to people who worked nearby, a few regulars from the neighborhood. It wasn't a real business. It was just a thing I did. That Tuesday, it was raining hard. Not the kind of rain that makes things pretty. The kind that gets inside your collar and makes everyone miserable. I was in the back room finishing up a small order, a dozen mixed stems for a woman who came every other week for her mother's nursing home room, when I heard knocking at the metal door that opened to the alley. I opened it and found 2 boys. I want to say they were 13, maybe 14. Looking back, they might have been younger. They were both completely soaked. The taller one, a dark-haired kid with very serious eyes, was holding a piece of cardboard over the head of the shorter one. The cardboard was so wet it had gone limp and wasn't doing anything useful. The shorter one had on a jacket that was at least 2 sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up so many times they'd formed thick cuffs above his wrists. They didn't ask me for anything. That's what I remember most. The taller one just said, "Is there somewhere we could wait out of the rain for a little while? We're not going to steal anything." Something about the way he said that last part, very matter-of-fact, not defensive, like he'd learned to lead with it to save time, made my chest hurt a little. I let them in. I got them both a towel from the break room. I was in the middle of asking if they were hungry when I realized I already knew the answer and went to get my lunch instead. I hadn't eaten it anyway. Turkey sandwich, an apple, a bag of those little cheddar crackers. The shorter boy inhaled that sandwich so fast, I went and found a couple granola bars and an orange from someone's desk in the front office. He ate those too. The taller one ate more slowly and watched me the whole time, like he was waiting to find out what the catch was. "We'll leave as soon as it stops," he said. "It's not supposed to stop until 6, I said. "You can stay." I kept working. They sat on overturned buckets and watched me strip thorns off a batch of roses. After a while, the shorter boy started asking questions about the flowers. "What was that one? Why did you cut it like that? Do people really pay money for those? $40 for flowers that are going to die in a week?" "They make people happy for a week," I said. "That's worth something." He thought about that seriously, like it was a math problem. When it finally slowed to a drizzle around 5:30, I walked them out to the alley. I didn't ask where they were going. I had a feeling asking would embarrass them, and they were already managing their dignity very carefully. But before they left, I tore a piece of brown packing paper off a roll by the door and I wrote down my name and the warehouse phone number. "If you need to get out of the rain again," I said. The taller boy took it and folded it once, very precisely, and put it in his jacket pocket. The shorter one turned back at the mouth of the alley. "Thank you for the food," he said. "I'm going to pay you back someday." "Don't worry about it," I said. "I'm going to," he said, like it was already decided. They came back twice more that month, once just to stay warm, once because the shorter boy, I never got either of their names, and they never gave them, had cut his hand on something and it needed cleaning. I had a first aid kit. I cleaned it and put a bandage on it and told him it wasn't deep enough to need stitches. He sat very still while I did it and didn't make a sound. Then spring came and I didn't see them again. For a few weeks, I looked for them when I drove through certain parts of the neighborhood. Then I stopped looking because I didn't know what I would even do if I found them, and because I was 20 years old and my own life had its own forward motion. I thought about them sometimes over the years. I hoped they were okay. I opened Wren Root 11 years later in a narrow storefront on a street in Portland that was just starting to become the kind of street people wrote about in food blogs. I had spent those 11 years working for other people, saving money, taking every floral design course I could find, learning the business side of things. My uncle lent me $15,000 as a startup loan, which I paid back within 3 years. The rest I had saved myself. The shop was small, but it was exactly what I wanted. White walls, exposed brick on one side, a long farm table for working, a cooler with glass fronts. I did weddings, events, weekly accounts with 3 local restaurants and a hotel downtown. I also did walk-ins, which I loved most, the people who came in on impulse, who needed something beautiful for no particular reason. For 7 years it worked. It really worked. I wasn't getting rich, but I was making a living doing the thing I loved, and that felt like an enormous amount to be grateful for. The trouble started when my business partner came in. Her name was Ingrid. She was a friend of a friend, a marketing consultant who approached me after doing some work for one of the restaurants I supplied. She had a vision for what Wren Root could become. A lifestyle brand, she said. Online sales. A subscription box service. Workshops. Wholesale accounts with corporate clients across 3 states. She had numbers, projections, a whole presentation with fonts I'd never seen before. I was cautious. I told her I needed to think about it. But she was very good at wearing down caution. She had an answer for every hesitation. She was warm and funny, and she made it all seem inevitable. Like the shop was already outgrowing me, and the only question was whether I'd grow with it. I brought in an attorney to look at the partnership agreement. She recommended changes. Ingrid agreed to all of them. We signed in October. Within 6 months, I understood I had made the worst decision of my life. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about these situations that nobody tells you. It's incremental. A small withdrawal from the business account that she explained away, a contract I hadn't seen before that she said she'd already handled, access to our wholesale accounts that she said she needed for the marketing strategy. Small things, things that each had a reasonable explanation. By the time I started connecting the pieces, she had redirected nearly $80,000 in business revenue through a shell entity she controlled. She had signed a lease extension on the shop in my name without my knowledge. She had opened credit accounts using the business's EIN, and she had done all of it with such patience and such normalcy that I kept second-guessing myself, kept thinking I must be misunderstanding something, kept thinking there had to be an explanation. The night I finally understood what she'd done, I sat on the floor of my kitchen for about an hour. Then I called my attorney. It took 14 months. Civil litigation, a criminal fraud referral to the DA's office, a forensic accountant who charged more per hour than I had ever earned in a day. My attorney was extraordinary, and she worked with me on the fees, but it still cost more than I had. I took a second mortgage on my condo. I borrowed from my aunt. I ran the shop on almost nothing, cutting every cost I could find, doing all the deliveries myself, losing accounts because I couldn't maintain the service level. In the end, Ingrid was charged and pled out. She made restitution of a fraction of what she'd taken. She didn't serve time. She moved to another state, and I had debts I could not repay and a business that could not survive them. My attorney told me in November. The math didn't work. I could keep fighting, or I could close. I closed. I don't want to linger too long in what that felt like, because I think it's the kind of pain that sounds manageable from the outside and wasn't. It wasn't just money. It was 11 years of 6-day weeks. It was knowing every regular customer's name and their daughter's wedding and which flowers their late wife had liked. It was something I had built, carefully, the way you tend something. And it had been taken from me by someone I trusted. I think the hardest part was the embarrassment. People kept saying, "I'm so sorry, I heard what happened," and I would nod and smile and feel the particular burn of having been foolish in public. My aunt didn't let me wallow. She showed up at my door with groceries on a Thursday night in late November and told me I was having dinner with her, and then I was going to get some sleep, and the rest we would figure out. She was 71 years old and had buried 2 husbands and raised 3 children alone after the second one left, and she did not have a very high tolerance for defeat. "You are not the first person to be stolen from," she said, "and you won't feel like this forever." "How do you know?" I said. "Because nothing lasts forever," she said. "That includes the bad things. People forget that part." The closing date was set for December 22nd. I had exactly 3 weeks to liquidate the remaining inventory, cancel the accounts, and say goodbye to 11 years. The last week was brutal. Customers came in to buy things and also to hug me and tell me how much the shop had meant to them, and every single one of those conversations was kind, and also almost unbearable. My 2 employees, both of them had been with me for years, stayed until the last day, which they didn't have to do, and I will never stop being grateful for that. On the morning of the 22nd, I did the watering. I packed the few personal things into a cardboard box, the hand-painted sign, a framed photo from the first day we opened, the original wholesale invoice from my uncle's warehouse that I'd kept as a kind of talisman. I walked through the coolers one last time, touching the door handles. I turned off the lights. I was at the front counter, about to pick up my box, when the door opened. I thought it was my attorney. She had said she might stop by. It wasn't. 2 men came in, both of them somewhere in their late 20s, early 30s. The first was tall, with dark hair going a little gray at the temples and very serious eyes. The second was shorter, in a coat that I noticed, in that strange detail noticing way your brain works when it's already overloaded, was extremely well tailored. They were followed by a third person, a woman in a dark blazer carrying a leather portfolio, who looked like an attorney the way certain people just look like the thing they are. The taller man looked around at the empty shop. Then he looked at me. "We've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks, he said. "Your business line was disconnected." "It is," I said. "We're closed today." "We know," he said. "We wanted to get here before 5. I had no idea who these people were. I was tired and a little hollowed out from the morning, and I genuinely thought for one strange second that this was someone coming to buy the coolers. The shorter man reached into his coat and took out something small. He set it on the counter between us. It was a piece of brown packing paper, folded once. It had gone soft with age, but it had been kept carefully. No tears, no water damage. Just the soft fraying you get from years in a pocket or a drawer. You could still read the number on it, though the ink had faded. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked up at him. "I told you I was going to pay you back," he said. I put my hand on the counter, because I needed something solid. His name was Eli. His friend, the taller one, was Fletcher. They had grown up in the foster care system together, and had been placed that March with a family in a neighborhood near my uncle's warehouse, a placement that hadn't lasted, like most of theirs hadn't. The packing paper phone number had traveled with Eli through 3 more placements and then into adulthood. "I always knew where it was," he said. "I kept it because it was the only time he stopped, cleared his throat, started again. It was a Tuesday. You gave me half your lunch and cleaned my friend's hand, and you didn't ask us for anything." "I remember," I said. My voice wasn't quite working right. "I looked you up probably 10 years ago," he said. "I saw you'd opened this place. I kind of kept track. Not in a weird way, just I wanted to know things were okay for you. Fletcher, the attorney said, had co-founded a logistics software company in 2017, which had been acquired 2 years ago for a number that she named that I'm not going to repeat here because it still makes my head go strange. Ely ran the operations division of the same company. They had both been following the news around my fraud case, watching from a distance, trying to figure out how to help without being intrusive. We didn't know how to reach you in a way that didn't feel presumptuous, Ely said. We don't want you to feel like this is charity. It's not. The attorney opened her portfolio. They were proposing two things. The first was a full repayment of my documented legal and financial losses from the fraud case. Not a loan, not an investment. A repayment, she said, because what happened to me was a theft and they wanted to make it whole. The second was an offer to back the reopening of the shop, structured as a partnership, but entirely on my terms. I would maintain full operational control, they would provide capital, and if I wanted it, Eli's operational expertise. The paperwork gave me the right to buy out their stake at any time. You don't have to decide anything today, Ely said. You don't have to decide ever. If you just want the first part, that's okay too. If you don't want any of it, we'll leave. I looked at him. I looked at that piece of packing paper on the counter. You kept that for 17 years, I said. It mattered, he said simply. I had been holding myself very carefully all morning, the way you do when you know you're close to breaking and you're trying to get through just one more thing. I pressed my hand harder on the counter and breathed slowly. I want to say something embarrassing, I said. Okay. I thought about you two sometimes. Over the years, the kids in the alley in the rain, I used to hope you turned out okay. Ely smiled. He had a very contained smile, like he was careful with his expressions, but it reached all the way up. We turned out okay, he said. I didn't sign anything that day. My aunt's attorney reviewed everything over the following week, and she called me afterward and said, "These terms are so favorable to you that I actually called their attorney to make sure I was reading it right." I signed on January 8th. We reopened Wren Root in April, 6 weeks later than I'd initially planned, because I was not going to rush something I'd spent 11 years building. New location, slightly larger than the old one. Same street, same farm table, same glass front coolers. The hand-painted sign went back up. The chalkboard by the door got a new message. Ely came to the opening. Fletcher sent flowers, which I found funny and also incredibly sweet. Some of my old regulars came back that first day, which made me cry in the walk-in cooler when nobody could see me. I run the shop now the same way I always did, carefully, without shortcuts. Ely checks in once a quarter, mostly to look at the books and occasionally to tell me I should hire more help, which I am working on. He is still extremely serious and also, it turns out, quietly hilarious. We've become something like friends. The chalkboard by the door that first day back said, "March, ranunculus, sweet pea, the first 2 licks of the season." Everything comes back. People asked me later if I'd written that on purpose. Of course I had. I keep coming back to that piece of brown packing paper. Not the money, not the partnership agreement, not any of the things that technically saved the shop. Just that soft, folded square of paper that Ely had carried for 17 years. That's the thing my mind keeps returning to when I try to make sense of everything that happened. I was 20 years old when I let 2 wet kids stand in out of the rain and split a turkey sandwich with them. I wasn't thinking about karma or what comes around. I wasn't doing a calculation. I was just doing the only thing that made sense to do. When 2 hungry children are standing in front of you, you feed them. You don't ask for anything back. That's not virtue. That's just being a decent person. I think we've overcomplicated what it means to do right by people. But here's what I've come to understand. Slowly, over these past few years, the way you treat people when there's nothing in it for you. That's the truest thing about you. Not your resume. Not how you perform when someone's watching. The Tuesday afternoon choices, the small ones nobody documents. Those are the ones that actually define what kind of person you are. Ingrid was brilliant. She was talented and well-connected and knew how to read a room. And she made a choice. A series of choices that revealed exactly who she was when she thought the math was in her favor. Ely and Fletcher made a different kind of choice. They didn't have to track me down. They didn't owe me anything that the world would recognize as a debt. They just remembered what it felt like to be seen by someone who had no reason to see them, and they carried that with them until they had the means to do something about it. That's not luck. That's character. And character, I've learned, is built in the quiet moments before anyone is keeping score. I also think about the 11 years in between. The years I spent doing the work. The cold early mornings, the difficult clients, the slow seasons, the studying and the learning and the failing and trying again. When everything collapsed, I felt like all of that had been erased, like it counted for nothing, but it wasn't erased. It was exactly the foundation I stood on when I had to rebuild. I knew the work. I knew the business. I knew what I was doing and why. And that knowledge was mine in a way that no one could take from me. Ingrid could take the money. She couldn't take 17 years of knowing how to do something well. That matters. The investment you make in genuinely understanding your craft, in thinking clearly and solving problems honestly, that's not wasted even when the external thing fails. You carry it forward. It compounds. And when someone gives you a second chance, you are not starting over. You are starting from everything you already know. I spent a long time being ashamed of how long I held on before I saw what was happening. I kept thinking I should have known sooner, caught it earlier, been less trusting. And maybe, but I also know that the same willingness to trust, to believe people mean what they say, is part of why two boys in a rainy alley felt safe enough to knock on my door. You can't have one without risking the other. What I needed wasn't less trust. It was better judgment about where I placed it, and the steadiness to keep going when I got it wrong. The chalkboard still sits by the front door. I still write the week's flowers on it every Monday morning. Small ritual, quiet choice, same as always. Everything I know about getting through hard things I learn from doing it, not from being prepared for it. You stay decent when it's inconvenient. You keep learning even when it's slow. And when everything falls apart, and sometimes it will, you get back up and you go back to work. That's all it ever was.